Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christian. Yes, High Roads is a documentary that was filmed between Palestine and Barcelona, Spain. Basically, it's a film that, let's say, the initial ideas of the film started about 10 years ago in 2012. When I was living and working in near the Bethlehem area. From my experience living there, working there, and just kind of every day dealing with the situation of living in an occupied context with all the stress that the body kind of absorbs, let's say. All the tension and the stress that the body absorbs just from being in an occupied context, and especially considering that I was, a foreign person with a European passport. I'm North American, and I was working there, so I could come and go as I wanted to. So just reflecting on the amount of stress that my own body felt, and speaking with my friends who lived there, who were not able to travel or to leave as I was, about how they basically could manage to deal with this accumulated stress that comes from living basically without freedom. So, but still resisting and still living. So basically, I had begun making taking some images because I was swimming a lot at the YMCA. And from then, about 5 years later, in about 2017, I finally started to write the script. And then in 2019, I was planning to go to make the film, but then COVID hit. And so the film was actually blocked for 2 years. The production of the film was blocked until the borders opened again. So I was able to go and film in April of 2022. Basically, the film ends up being interviews with 4 women. And these 4 women that I interviewed, what they practice what is commonly called sumud, which in Arabic means steadfastness. And what it means is resisting by being present. So resisting by just living, existing, and doing your thing. I chose to work with 4 women because I found that there was a lot of incredible women doing very interesting things in Palestine. And so, for example, Diala Issid is a marathon runner who also she was studying architecture in London. She had studied architecture at Bislett University. And she's one of the founders of Right to Movement, which is a marathon that is aimed at making the world aware of the difficulties of movement within Palestine. So the way that Right to Movement works is because there's no amount of free space to run for the length of the marathon. People have to keep running back and forth. So you have to go back and forth. So Diala explains this in the film. So the Right to Movement also does digital marathons. So basically people around the world will run the length of the wall. So they have this kind of way through exercise, so through sports, to kind of raise awareness about what it means to be living in a context where you don't even have that space of movement. Why it started at the swimming pool, the YMCA, is because it's very difficult for people to access swimming pools in Palestine. And specifically, one of the people, the first person I interviewed was Sabine Hasboun, who was an Olympic swimmer in the 2012 Olympics, and she had happened to be training in Barcelona, where I lived also, because there's no training facilities in Palestine to send people to the Olympics. So people in Palestine who go to the Olympics have to train in other countries. So then there's also, I interviewed physicist Dr. Wafa Khatar, who it turns out was actually the physics professor of Diala Issid, who is the marathon runner. So what was interesting was how these women ended up being connected, either through education or through sports. So this person, Dr. Wafa Khatar, who I interviewed, is the first Palestinian woman to have a PhD degree in particle physics. One of the first Palestinians to have a PhD degree in particle physics, because there wasn't this type of degree in Palestine. She studied in Norway and developed her career in Norway. But chose to go back to Palestine, in this case to Birzeit, near Ramallah, to the main university, to teach physics, because she felt that there was a strong need to encourage the study of sciences, advanced sciences, and specifically to be a role model for girls and women in the context to open their minds, open their possibility to careers in the sciences. So she felt it was her mission to, as she says, to leave freedom and to return to occupation, because she felt that what she could give to the context of the university in Birzeit was much more than she could give just as a regular, let's say, scientist in Bergen, in Norway. She also is one of the founders of the Astronomical Observatory, which is also in the film.
Yeah, I think it was a really eye-opening film. I saw so much stuff I didn't know about, like with the marathons, and like this wording. For some people, running is just running. Here, it's like a political protest. And the fact that that this telescope stands there maybe like for 7 years or 8, it's like crazy to me. And I think a lot of people are not aware of these issues, and the film does a great job with that focus on the women. And I was deeply impressed by the film. And yeah, I hope a lot of people will have the chance to see the film at our place. And yeah, what was the idea behind that breathing thing that runs through the whole film and makes totally sense in the context?
Okay, the breathing actually comes from one of the things, like the difficulty that what happens to your body, you know, when you're in these contexts. And one of the people that I interviewed actually is the yoga instructor, one of the most well-known yoga instructors in Palestine, Elda Zagmut, and the importance of being able to take control of your breath. You know, so I think that Elda's interview is very interesting because her perception of freedom is actually like a very intimate kind of freedom. No, it also comes from the fact that the importance, well, the first person that I interviewed was Sabine Hasbun, the swimmer, and so the importance of being able to breathe underwater, to breathe in these different kinds of matter, and just the ability, the idea of just being able to breathe in general.
Yeah. As it's an awesome metaphor for the whole thing. And I found also the film was very nice. It was not judgmental. It just states how it is, and you make your own assumptions out of it.
Yeah. For me, it was important because one thing is that there's a lot of films that either show Palestinian society as a society of passive victims, or other films that show Palestinian society as, as terrorists. So for me, it was very important to be able to make a film which showed the incredible amount of knowledge and personal initiative and resistance that people have in the context, and especially women, because there's this idea also that women are not able to do things, and to show the agency of these people. The agency of these people. And also, one of the things, I mean, this is also very important, is that I am a foreign person who goes, to Palestine to make a film, and it's based on my lived experience there. And it was also a film. The camera people of the film are Palestinians that I've known. They're two, Tamara Abu Labin and Abed Khatib. They're people that I've known for 10 years, and we've worked together. So it was important to deal with making a film that was a collaboration. So it was an internal gaze and an external gaze.
Yeah, I'm still impressed. We were all in the screening room. I was like immediately yes from everybody. And and there was this very brave, like the sacrifice, for example, to come back to the country and just what you said, like stay there to mean something. And it's like an awesome thing. So could you give us your own opinion what freedom means to you, maybe regarding to the film?
So regarding the film, I mean, what's interesting is that each person gives like a different interpretation of freedom. So, I mean, in the case of Dr. Wafa Khatar, I mean, there's this freedom, this lack of freedom is what is driving her to, create an observatory and to look into outer space. And I think Wafa's interview is so beautiful metaphorically, and poetic and scientific at the same time. This kind of that even looking at the stars has so much more. It's political because you're imagining, what life could it could be like beyond these restrictions on the planet, which kind of actually makes me think of. I was rewatching Sun Ra's Space is the Place, so the idea of creating another, going to another planet and creating a planet where only Black people live, so this idea of like, we have to look to the stars because what is around is pure oppression. And also she speaks very well about the gaze. And I think that there's also there's the freedom of what you're able to see, what you're able to look at, how far your vision can go. So even what you can think, what you can be, who you can become. So that's one aspect of freedom. Another aspect of freedom was, Diala Isid, the marathon runner, which was very specific. It was very much like the freedom to be able to use your body and to move in space in the context of a territory that's all cut up into pieces. So it's difficult to access space to practice sport in the open air. Which is then the case. We go to a closed sports facility, which is the swimming pool. And, you have an extremely talented swimmer who her freedom to be able to participate in an agonistic event like the Olympics was in order to be able to do that, it's actually her passport out. Because that allows her to move to another context to be able to train. So that's kind of what makes her exceptional in this case. And then the fourth person is Elda Zagmut. Her story is also very interesting because she was born in Jordan and her family migrated to Palestine from a Palestinian family born in Jordan. So her family chose to move. And her interpretation of freedom in the end is, that the freedom has to come from within. As a yoga practitioner. So these are different interpretations of freedom. So I think that for me, my interpretation of freedom, obviously, well, for me as a person who's able to go back and forth from a context like that, is the ability to be able to move freely across borders, to enter places, to be able to decide when you want to go, when you want to leave, to be able to decide more or less within every condition, situation. Even in all societies, there's class issues, there's gender issues, there's race issues. It's but freedom means to be able to move about through borders.
Yeah. Did you face any like during the production any real struggles or from the law or something?
The film actually was filmed in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, in Birzeit, in Beit Sahur, in areas. We had to cut Nablus out. Actually, there was a part that was a hammam in Nablus. It was a hammam for women. It was cut out because when the day before we arrived, there was 2 people were killed. So there were 2 civilians were killed. So there was mass funerals on the streets, and then the situation became complicated because when there's mass funerals on the streets, there's also military oppression, roadblocks, and then random stops, random checks. The situation can get out of control. So we had to, tailor the film to the issue of where we could move to, where we could go. Obviously also respecting the fact that there were these mass funerals going on. And another thing actually that happened during the filming, at the end of the film, it says that, the 18 people were killed in the 10, 11 days that we were there, because it was a very difficult moment. It was a moment when there was a combination of Eid and Pesach at the same time. So basically, when we filmed in Birzeit, when we filmed Dr. Wahfa Khadar speaking, there's actually a moment that is cut out because you can hear kind of like a popping sound. And one of my camera people, Abid Khatib, said, "Oh, can you hear that? Sounds like popcorn." And he said, "They're shooting people nearby." So we said, okay, And because that filming was very long, because the filming in the university, we actually went through Ramadan iftar, so we had to go through the evening, the breaking of the fast, and then go look at the stars. So during the filming, there was a raid in a nearby village, and like the people I was working with and the other students, they can tell by the sound of things what is happening nearby. Like by the sound of a noise, they know that it's a type of weapon. And so we finished the filming. We wrapped up, and Dr. Wafa Qatar invited me and my crew to go on a picnic for the iftar of the next day in the countryside where she was born. And the next day, I got an email from her, and this was completely called off, because what had happened was that 2 people had been killed in the raid that we heard while we were filming. And so there were mass funerals in the streets, and then there was military oppression on the streets, and it became unsafe for us to be able to go. So even during the moment of the filming, there's stuff going on.
But thanks that you made this great film out of all these experiences. And I think it's an important film, and we're really happy to show them. You can see High Road at our festival on the 28th of October at Block 5 in Weimar, in the Cinema Ronneby. And I would love to invite everybody to see this important film, and it has a very strong message and very strong protagonists.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking time for the interview.
Thank you, Christian.